tremendous honor this morning, right worshipful Brother Hightower, to be talking to you about your career in Masonry, and I'd even like to explore a little of your civic career. There's no question that the year 1972, which was the year you were Grand Master, was a highlight in the years of the Grand Lodge of Texas. You have even then distinguished yourself in public life, and since then have distinguished yourself even more. And all of us who are the Masons of Texas are extremely proud of all of your accomplishments. What I'd like now, if you would, to sort of bring us up to date a little bit from the time that you began life in a place called Memphis in Hall County, Texas.
Well, thank you, Jack. You exhibit a bias of a good friend, and I appreciate it very much. Yes, I was born in Memphis, Texas, September 6, 1926. I lived there until I graduated from high school. I came off to Baylor the summer of 1944 after graduating, and came to school here for that summer. I knew I was going to come back to Baylor as soon as I finished my military obligation, and I thought to have a little bit to start on would give me an advantage. So I spent that summer down here in Baylor, and then went back home and joined the Navy. Was away for 2 years in the active duty in the Navy. Incidentally, I joined on September 2nd, 1944. The war was over. The Japanese surrendered on September 2nd, 1945, so it just took me a year to get that project completed. And then I got out in July of 46 and came back to Baylor that fall. That was my early career, of course, high school and all. My parents lived in Memphis. My father had lived there for many years. He came there in 1890, and they were in the florist business, and I grew up in that business.
What caused you to want to be an attorney?
Well, Mother, I never could understand that, and I think Daddy probably had the same questions. I had always, well, in the first place, I love politics. I had a real interest in history. I've been a history bug or nut all my life. I can remember the presidential campaign of 1932. I was 6 years old, and I was very partisan in 1932 for President Roosevelt. And so I've been interested in government and politics and law just since before I started school. So I guess it was natural that I would be interested in going to law school.
I noticed in 1952 you were first elected to the Texas House of Representatives.
Yes, I got out of Baylor in 51, and I got my law degree in 51. I had received an academic degree in 1949. But getting the law degree in 51, Colleen and I had married in August of 1950. She's from Tulia, another West Texan, and we knew we wanted to live in West Texas. Wanted to live in a town large enough that I could make a living practicing law, but yet close enough home that we could go home when we wanted to. And Vernon seemed to be a good place. We liked the looks of the town, and we moved there in May of 51. And I started practicing law, and then in January of 52, I announced as a candidate for the House of Representatives. It was sort of a surprise to my wife. She had said that she didn't realize just how interested I was in politics, and it might have been a different story in our courtship had she known. But I believe in doing one thing at a time, and so I got her before I divulged that my real ambitions were political.
You did not seek election, though, after that first term in the Texas House.
No, the congressmen back at that, or members of the legislature back at that time, made $10 a day for the first 120 days, and then $5 after that.
Starvation wages.
It was. We had our oldest daughter, Anne, was born in January of 1953. I spent that 6 months in Austin. I came home the month of June, I guess it was, 1953, and went back to practicing law. I made $25 that first month, and literally scared me to death. So I went down to Fort Worth and got a job in a law firm and stayed there for a year, deciding that I couldn't afford to stay in the legislature. We stayed down there a year and then came back in June of '54. I was appointed district attorney then in January of '55 by Governor Shivers. I stayed then as district attorney for 7 years.
I might point out, for the record, that during this period of time, between 1955 and 1964, that Jack Hightower was named one of the state's outstanding district attorneys. After 1964, I noticed you were then, in that year, elected to the Texas Senate.
Yes, I resigned as district attorney in '61 and made an unsuccessful race for Congress at that time in a special election. And then was out of politics for a little while. And then our good friend, your good friend and mine, George Moffett, past Grand Master, was the state senator.
Cotton.
And he had been a very special friend through the years. And he sort of anointed me, I guess, or at least supported me to succeed him in the Texas Senate. Incidentally, of Masonic interest, George Moffett was Grand Senior Warden in 1953 and presided as Master of the Lodge when I was raised as a Master Mason. And then in 1971, when I was installed as Grand Master, he was the installing Grand Master.
Yes, I recall that.
So our lives, Masonically and politically, were closely interwoven. He was a very dear friend, of course, and then I was installed as Grand Master in December of '71, and George passed away, I believe, in February of '72.
Sometime, if it's convenient to you, I'd like for us to interview you with regard to George Moffett. There are not too many who remember individuals, and I think an interview with you discussing George sometime might be useful to
I'd love to do that.
Our records.
Sure
would. We'll continue, Brother Hightower, from that point on. After your appointment to the Senate.
No, I was elected to the Senate.
I see. Yeah. You succeeded.
I succeeded George Moffett in January of 1965. I ran in the year of '64 and assumed office in '65.
And I note that the record shows that in the regular session of 1971 that you were elected pro tempore. Is that
pro tempore.
Pro tempore.
President pro tempore of the Senate.
Yes.
It's an honor that's passed around, and I had the privilege of serving that year. And sometime during the time a man serves as President pro tempore of the Senate, under the Constitution, he's third in line to be governor, in the absence of the governor and lieutenant governor. So, as a matter of courtesy, the governor and lieutenant governor usually absent themselves from the state on at least one day during that time. And they did that for me, and I believe it was April 4th, 1973. So I have been governor one day.
All during this period, of course, your family life, which was apart from your political life, was going on. Would you like to discuss your family and your children at that point?
We have 3 daughters. Anne, our oldest one, is now married, living in Washington, D.C. Her name is Thornburg now. Anne was born in 1953. Then in 1956, Amy is our middle daughter, who, incidentally, Anne graduated from Baylor. And Amy, who has also graduated from Baylor in 1979, is now working in Dallas. And Allison, our youngest daughter, is a junior here in Baylor. So we come to Waco often, and our lives have been closely knit with Baylor, Waco, Masonry. All of these things go closely together in our Hightower family.
And then the great event, as far as the state of Texas was concerned, in that you were elected to the House of Representatives of the United States Congress.
Yes, in 1974.
That was in 1974. Would you like to discuss any of that particular period as you came up to that point?
Well, that might be of some interest. In 1971, the legislature redistricted the state congressional districts, and they combined the districts of Representative Graham Purcell and Representative Bob Price. Mr. Price is from Pampa, Purcell was from Wichita Falls. They put these two districts together, and that compelled those two men, Price, Republican, Purcell, Democrat, to run against each other, because only one could survive in a combined district. In 1972, that happened, and Mr. Price was elected. I sensed at the time that that district was basically Democratic, but because of the presidential nominee of the Democratic Party, who was George McGovern,
yes,
Mr. Purcell was defeated. So I decided that I had always wanted to serve in Congress, and that with Mr. Purcell defeated and my district being in the hands of Mr. Price, that I would run in 74. So this was before the Watergate scandal developed. Then, as it turned out, the Watergate scandal did develop, and there was quite a political upheaval in 1974. Now, of course, I like to think that I would have been elected anyway, but I would have to acknowledge that the political upheaval of anti-Republican or anti-Nixon,
yes,
as a result of Watergate helped
well,
in my election.
It's my understanding that you lean at least toward the conservative side, although I think you probably prefer not to be tagged exactly.
Well, I don't mind. I just don't want to spell it with a capital C.
Yes.
I am conservative. If I wanted to try to evaluate my political philosophy, I would rather describe it as progressive. Yes. I'm not, as the old quotation, not the first to try the new or the last to throw the old aside. Moderate is a word that's often used, but in the text of today's identity, political identity, I am conservative.
I like the term progressive, though.
Yes, yes.
Well, right words for Brother Hightower. At this point, I would like to, before this interview must be concluded, for you to discuss how you how you participated in our Grand Lodge, and then toward the office of Grand Junior Warden. I know that back in the 60s, I served with you while we were both on various committees of the Grand Lodge.
Yes. Well, my interest in Grand Lodge, of course, was enhanced not only by my local participation in Vernon Lodge, where I was master in the early 60s, 1961, I believe, but my close friendship with Senator Moffett, and I came to Grand Lodge often with him. We traveled together. And I know that he advanced me by being sure that I knew his friends, and I received probably much more recognition than a young man of my age and experience at that time would be entitled to. And I was appointed to several Grand Lodge committees. I served as chairman briefly of Masonic Jurisprudence Committee. Then Mr. Honey Heineman.
Oh, I remember.
You remember Honey?
Yes, he died in office as Grand Junior Warden.
Grand Junior Warden from the Valley. He was Grand Junior Warden and passed away. And in 1969, I guess it was, the Grand Lodge had to elect a Grand Senior Warden and a Grand Junior Warden, both. So some of my friends suggested that I agree to serve as Grand Senior Warden. Duncan Howard had been suggested for some time as a potential Grand Junior Warden. So that I was very honored and, of course, flattered and pleased, and my name was submitted, and I was elected Grand Senior Warden. So I guess I'm the only living past Grand Master. Perhaps I haven't studied the other histories, but the only one around that has not been a past Grand Junior Warden.
Well, that in itself is perhaps a distinction.
Right.
Since you have left the office of Grand Master, I know that you've been chairman of a couple of ad hoc committees. The other committees that you now serve on or have served on?
I've been on purposes and policies for the last 6 years. I have enjoyed that.
That's been an interesting assignment in the year 1980 in particular.
It really has. It really has. I've enjoyed all of my Grand Lodge experience. I enjoyed coming down here. You know, a lot of people that do not come, I tell Masons this all the time, that if they've never been, they ought to go. It's the unique kind of fellowship that we enjoy. Only at Grand Lodge.
That's right.
And I've gone to many other kinds of conventions. I used to go to a lot of bar conventions. Of course, I've been to political conventions. I can honestly say that just from the fellowship standpoint, there's nothing to equal what we have here at Grand Lodge.
I'm afraid this is about all of the time that we now have. It's regrettable that we don't have at least another hour or two to be able to sit here and discuss this great man's great public life and great Masonic life.
Oh, but we do.
I would have you understand that first that this is being taped under the oral history program now implemented by the Committee on Masonic Education of the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Texas. I'm Jack Kelly, chairman of the committee. Brother Hightower, again, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you,
for taking
Jack.
part in this interview.
I thank you for doing it.